Hey, how's it going? This is Scott from the White Boy Chinese podcast, where I teach you elementary Chinese like a normal person, not a robot. If you stick around to the end of this podcast, I'm going to share with you a bargaining tip that is guaranteed to work in China. Next up, nextly, if you find this podcast helpful, please do me a favor and leave a 5-star review. If you leave a 5-star review, I'll definitely go ahead and read it on the air. And thank you personally. I know it's kind of annoying, and the iTunes or perhaps Stitcher, wherever I decide to put this podcast up, system is a little bit kind of clinky and annoying to use, but if you did it, it would be a huge help. So to kind of discuss what's going on with me, I decided to start this mini podcast. I am the white dude from New York who became fluent in Chinese despite having a learning disability. And how I did it was, I kind of deconstructed what was going on around me. I literally stopped going to Chinese class and sort of made up my own system. And for the longest time, I thought I was kind of a weirdo for coming up with a system. But then I heard Tim Ferriss, a really famous entrepreneur, linguist, kind of do-everything sort of guy, was talking about doing the same exact thing, which kind of gave me the inspiration to go ahead and start this podcast. So let's kind of review what we learned the last time. At the very end of the podcast, I said this mysterious word, which was 谢谢. And 谢谢, which is the fourth tone twice, that descending no kind of sound. 谢谢means thank you. So at the end of the episode, I thanked everybody for listening. And then I talked about a pretty interesting topic that my old Chinese teachers would probably want to slap me for even bringing up, is tones. Now, a lot of people have a lot of trouble with this, and it's no big deal. I did too. And the next time, I'll share with you a special tip on how I managed to kind of master the tones. But before you get carried away, and it is important, the tones, like for example, if you want to speak Chinese at a higher level, I would recommend you do your best to master them. And definitely don't push it aside, try learning them. But when you first start out, don't be afraid to not speak because you haven't mastered the tones. Just do your best, and more than likely, the Chinese person you're speaking to is going to know what you're saying based on the context of what you're saying. So if a Chinese person or someone who speaks Chinese pretty well is busting your chops because you're not focusing 150% of your energy on the tones, just tell them, hey, I'm a person. This is how I learn. Because at times Chinese can be very overwhelming and you just got to take it one step at a time. There's no shortcuts. Okay, so now that we went on kind of a tangent, the last time we spoke about yao, which means to want, and bu yao, which means not to want. In Chinese, frequently you have to put the verb in the negative form, which is a fancy way of saying put no in front of the word to make sense. So if I say 不要, it means not to want or not to need. But if you say 要, it means to want or to need. So let's go ahead and go to the next part of this mini daily podcast. The first thing we're going to learn how to do is how to ask a question. And this really threw me off because they have this little word that you tack on the end of your sentence. And if you look at any Chinese textbook or dictionary, it says that it's a particle. So here I am, Scott, going to university in upstate New York. And I asked my teacher, what the hell does this ma thing mean? To which she responded, it is a particle. And I was like flabbergasted. I was like, okay, I understand that it's a particle, but what does it mean? To which she responded, it's a particle. So a lot of times you can't always refer to Chinese people for the answers. A lot of times you have to refer to a foreigner, someone that had to actually learn the language to get a clear explanation. So I'm going to share with you the thing that drove me crazy in college. So last episode we learned how to say yao. If you want to ask someone, do you want it? You say, yao ma. Yao. means to want or to need, and ma is the neutral tone, so that means it has no tone. It's kind of like a question mark in English, but you have to say it aloud. If you don't say it out loud, no one's going to know that you're asking a question. Let's say you're in a marketplace and a Chinese guy is holding up a pair of shoes, and he's looking at you and he's saying, Yao ma, yao ma, yao ma. He's asking you, do you want this pair of shoes, essentially, because he's holding the shoes and like, you want it, you want it, you want it? So you have two responses. You can say, Yao. You're responding with the same verb to imply that you do want it. So if he says, Yao ma, and you say, Yao, that means you do want it. But if you don't want it, you can say, Bu yao, because you put the verb in the negative form. So if he says, Yao ma, and you do not want it, you simply respond, Bu yao, meaning you do not want it. Let's say you want to be a little bit more clear and, not kind of demanding and not as direct. You can say the word you, which is ni, which is the third tone. It descends, then sharply goes upward. So, ni yao ma. So if I say ni yao ma, if you say ni, which means you, yao, which means to want or to need, and ma, which means question mark. That's all ma means. It's like a question mark. So if I say ni yao ma, I'm asking you, do you want whatever object I might be holding? So if I'm holding a cup of coffee and ask you ni yao ma, you could say yao, meaning you do want it, or bu yao. So in this episode, we learned how to say two new words. The first one being ni, which means you. The second one being ma. And ma is simply just a question mark. You tack it on the end of your sentences to imply that you're asking a question. So if you don't put that in your question, it's pretty likely that a Chinese person will have no idea what you're talking about. Well, rather, they'll have no idea that you're asking a question. Alright, as promised at the beginning of the episode, I promised a tip about bargaining. If you're going to bargain, here's what you do. Since we can't count yet, what you do is, let's see, you can't do this in a mall, by the way. Nothing kind of, I guess, Western or like a restaurant or anything. Any place that's sort of modern or a place you eat, you can't really bargain unless they're ripping you off. So let's say you're in a street market and you want to buy a really cool t-shirt. You say, yao, yao, yao. And the person gives you the t-shirt, and they write down on the calculator it cost, 150 yuan, which is the Chinese currency. What you do is you take the calculator and write approximately a third of the price, which I would write probably 50. And the person's going to look at you like you're an idiot and go, ha 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 ha, no, 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 no. To which you respond by simply walking out the door. After you walk out the door, if you were close to the correct price, the person will call you back. If you're not close, the person will let you leave. And if the person lets you leave, you don't walk back. You walk 2 shops down to buy the same exact thing and raise your price a little. And chances are, in these markets, they sell like the same thing like all over the place. So you can experiment as much as you want. One last thing before we go, if you want to learn more, definitely check. One last thing before we go, if you want to learn more, definitely go back to my website, whiteboychinese.wordpress.com. I decided to go with a free old website for now, so it's whiteboychinese.wordpress.com. And if you go back to that website, what you do is you'll see a big blue box that says click on me to get on my mailing list. Click on it and you'll get free information to learn more Chinese as well as complete access to me. So if you need a tutor or anything like that, definitely hop on the mailing list. I think that's enough for today. 谢谢, and I'll see you next time.